The 1970s gave us wild fashion, disco beats, and some of the worst cars ever built. These 12 clunkers were slow, unreliable, and fell apart faster than you could fix them. They weren't bought for love, they were bought because they were cheap. If you had one, you weren't cruising in style, you were just trying to get from A to B without calling a tow truck.
Click the subscribe button. This is the channel where you will find rare and incredible facts about cars.
Number 12. If cars were breakfast cereals, the '79 Ford Fairmont would be a plain bowl of cornflakes. No sugar, no fruit, no surprises. Just dependable crunch. Ford cooked this thing up as a budget-friendly, everyday cruiser for folks who didn't need chrome fins or a roaring V8. They wanted something to get them to work, the grocery store, and maybe the occasional trip to Grandma's without drama. Power came from a no-nonsense 4-cylinder, or if you were feeling wild, a 6. Either way, it wasn't exactly a drag strip hero, more like a steady shuffle down Main Street. The styling? Well, picture the automotive equivalent of a beige filing cabinet or your dad's brown corduroy blazer. Boxy, practical, and so middle of the road it practically was the road. Inside, it was all about business. Bench seats, simple controls, and enough legroom to haul you and your buddies to the bowling alley. No frills, no flash, and honestly, no problem. The Fairmont wasn't trying to win car shows. It was trying to get America moving without breaking the bank. And here's the kicker. While flashy muscle cars were guzzling gas during an energy crisis, the Fairmont sipped fuel like a polite dinner guest. That's why your uncle probably bought one new, drove it for 15 years, and then handed it down to your cousin, who drove it for another 10. It was the kind of car you didn't brag about, but you were glad you had when winter hit and the battery still turned over. So, was the '79 Fairmont exciting? Nah. Was it reliable, cheap to fix, and built to do the job without complaining? You bet your sweet carburetor it was.
Number 11. In 1979, Chrysler strutted the LeBaron into showrooms like it was rolling out a Hollywood star. The brochures promised refined luxury, upscale motoring, and a driving experience beyond compare. Translation? It had chrome everywhere, a padded vinyl roof that screamed, "I made it," and just enough fake wood on the dash to make you feel like you were driving your grandma's dining room buffet. From the curb, the LeBaron looked like it belonged to someone who just closed a big real estate deal or owned half the bowling alleys in town. It was square, stately, and a little smug. But the second you fired it up and rolled out, reality hit you like a flat tire on a rainy night. The ride was soft, too soft, like driving on a waterbed. Every bump and pothole got announced by a full percussion section rattling somewhere in the door panels. Under the hood, you could get a V8, but in 1979, emissions rules had all the horsepower tied up like a hog at a county fair. The LeBaron had the soul of a lounge singer, but the lungs of a chain smoker. It would eventually get you to the country club, but don't expect it to hurry. Inside, the plush seats were wide enough to host a family reunion. And the luxury details, opera windows, wire wheel covers, and enough chrome trim to blind a man in direct sunlight, made sure your neighbors knew you were a person of taste. Problem was, all that class came wrapped in a package that rattled like a tin shed in a windstorm. Slam the door too hard, and something inside might decide to take permanent vacation. Still, for folks who wanted the look of a high roller ride without the high roller price, the '79 LeBaron was the ticket. It was a little bit Cadillac, a little bit disco, and a whole lot of good enough. Sure, it wasn't a precision driving machine, but it had charm, the kind that made you forgive its flaws, as long as you turned the radio up loud enough to drown out the rattles.
Number 10. Back in 1978, Pontiac rolled out the Sunbird like it was the hot new kid on the block. From 20 feet away, it looked like a baby Firebird. Sleek lines, sporty stance, and just enough chrome to make you think, hey, that's a little muscle car right there. Problem was, the closer you got, the more you realized it wasn't a lion. It was a house cat pretending to roar. Sure, Pontiac gave it the long hood, short deck, and a flashy bird emblem or two, but under the hood, that's where the Sunbird's hype train derailed. Most came with a little four-banger engine that tried hard but wheezed like your uncle after a flight of stairs. Even if you splurged on the optional V6, you still weren't exactly setting land speed records. The car's motto might as well have been, "We'll get there, eventually." The suspension wasn't much better. Cornering in a Sunbird felt less like precision driving and more like you were swaying along to a yacht rock song. Hit the gas and you got more slow and steady than burning rubber. But hey, at least you looked good doing it. Inside, Pontiac tried to sell you on European-inspired styling, which basically meant they threw in some fake wood, a sporty three-spoke steering wheel, and seats that hugged you just enough to remind you you'd bought the fun Pontiac, even if your fun had a speed limit. Still, for folks on a budget in the late '70s, the Sunbird was a ticket into the sporty car club, without paying full Firebird money or Firebird insurance rates. You could cruise Main Street, roll the windows down, blast your 8-track, and look like you were ready to race, as long as nobody actually challenged you. In the end, the '78 Sunbird was like dating someone who was great in photos but dull at dinner. Nice to look at, but not exactly thrilling to hang out with.
Runs and moves.
Number 9. If cars had a Most Likely to Oxidize award in high school yearbooks, the 1977 Dodge Aspen would have been valedictorian. On paper, it sounded like a winner. Roomy family sedan or wagon, decent styling, and Chrysler's big talk about quality and reliability. But in reality, the Aspen was about as durable as a popsicle in the Arizona sun. The Aspen hit showrooms as Dodge's answer to the Chevy Nova, promising a smooth ride, decent fuel economy, and a look that said, yeah, I'm sensible, but I've still got style. And to be fair, fresh off the lot, it did look pretty sharp. Trouble was, that fresh didn't last long, literally. Within a couple of winters, you'd see these cars in the grocery store parking lot with rocker panels dissolving into orange lace and wheel arches that looked like they'd been chewed by raccoons. The real kicker? These things could start rusting before you even got the first payment book halfway paid off. Salt on the roads just sped up the process. Drive through a Midwest winter, and by spring your Aspen looked like it had survived a shipwreck. Mechanics would poke a screwdriver through the fenders and just sigh. To add insult to injury, the Aspen wasn't exactly immune to Chrysler's late '70s quality control woes. Loose trim, electrical gremlins, and doors that didn't quite line up were part of the optional extras package, and you didn't even have to pay for them. But here's the thing. When it was new, the Aspen was comfortable, and it had that laid-back, floaty ride Americans loved back then. Plus, you could get a V8 under the hood, so at least it could move when you needed it to, assuming the frame wasn't busy turning into cornflakes. Today, if you see a rust-free 77 Aspen, it's either been living in a desert its whole life, or the owner has been washing and waxing it like it's the Mona Lisa. Because for most folks back in the day, the Aspen wasn't a long-term relationship. It was a quick fling before the rust breakup. Number 8. If the 1977 AMC Pacer were a person, it'd be that one uncle who shows up to Thanksgiving in a Hawaiian shirt in the middle of winter, totally out of place, but somehow you can't help but like him. The Pacer was AMC's moonshot at making a compact car for the future, but they must have been looking through a funhouse mirror when they designed it. The result? A wide, squat, bubble-shaped oddball that looked like it had been inflated with a bicycle pump. AMC called it the first wide small car, which is like calling a Chihuahua the first tall small dog. It had huge wraparound windows that gave you all the visibility in the world and gave the sun a perfect shot at turning the cabin into a rolling greenhouse. Sitting in a Pacer on a summer day was like baking in a glass oven with a steering wheel. And here's the kicker. During the fuel crisis, AMC figured people wanted an efficient little car. Makes sense, right? But instead of some featherweight engine sipping gas like a polite dinner guest, they stuffed in thirsty 6-cylinders and even offered a V8 because apparently irony was a design feature in the 70s. So yeah, you got all the looks of a futuristic economy car and the fuel bill of a muscle car. Still, there's no denying the Pacer had personality. It was roomy inside, quiet on the road, and turned heads everywhere it went, though not always for the right reasons. Some folks thought it looked like a space pod. Others thought it looked like a cartoon car that escaped from a Saturday morning TV show. Either way, you noticed it. Today, the Pacer's become a cult classic. Movies like Wayne's World cemented it as a lovable misfit of the automotive world. Sure, it may have guzzled gas like it was free, and sure, parking it next to a Corvette might have made it look like the Corvette's pregnant cousin, but it had charm. And in a decade full of boxy sedans and Me Too designs, the Pacer stood out, unapologetically weird and proud of it. Number 7. The 1976 Chevrolet Chevette was GM's answer to the fuel crisis. Small, cheap, and about as exciting as a wet toast sandwich. This thing was bare bones, so stripped down you could practically hear your own thoughts echoing through the cabin. No frills, no nonsense, no style points. Just 4 wheels, a tiny engine, and a steering wheel to keep you from wandering off into a ditch. The Chevette was meant to be economical, but let's be real, it was also a lesson in patience. Its little engine chugged along like it had a bad hangover, and highway merging was basically a prayer session. The suspension was stiff, the interior plastic felt like it could crack with a firm sneeze. And if you wanted power windows or air conditioning, well, good luck, pal. You'd have to sacrifice a goat or trade your firstborn. But here's the silver lining. It was cheap to buy, cheap to run, and nearly impossible to break completely. For a young driver, college kid, or anyone needing to haul groceries without feeling fancy, the Chevette did the job. And its quirks, they became part of its charm. Everyone who owned one knew it wasn't winning any beauty contests, but it was honest, like that friend who shows up to a party in sweatpants and owns it. So yeah, the 1976 Chevette wasn't pretty, it wasn't fast, and it certainly didn't make anyone's heart race. But it got you from point A to point B without asking for much in return. And in the wild, wild 70s, that was a feat all on its own. Number 6. Once the king of American muscle, the Mustang of 1976 had taken a serious hit. Meet the Mustang II, a shadow of its former self. Slower than a Sunday driver with a flat tire, cramped like a clown car, and about as gutless as a diet soda. Gone were the roaring V8s and swaggering curves. In their place, Ford squeezed a tiny engine under a body that looked like it was trying to convince everyone it was still tough. The Mustang II was built for the gas crunch era, so economy and insurance rates mattered more than horsepower. But let's be real, it was like showing up to a drag race with a tricycle. The handling was timid, acceleration was polite, to put it nicely, and anyone expecting the thrill of classic Mustangs was left clutching their steering wheel in disappointment. Still, it had its moments. It was compact, relatively affordable, and could sneak into a tight parking spot without crying. And for suburban kids dreaming of a Mustang badge without needing a second mortgage, it was good enough. But make no mistake, this little pony was more cute than ferocious, more mom's grocery getter than street king muscle car. In short, the 1966 Mustang II was a lesson in survival. It wasn't fast, flashy, or particularly fun, but it kept the Mustang name alive, even if it did so with a sheepish grin and a polite cough from the engine. Number 5. 1975 Plymouth Volare, the new small car, and the new headache. When Plymouth rolled out the 1975 Volare, they hyped it as the new small car. What they forgot to mention was that new didn't automatically mean good. On paper, it sounded promising. Smaller than the big gas guzzlers, roomy enough for the family, and designed to be the hip, modern ride for the fuel crisis crowd. In reality, let's just say owners got to know their local mechanic on a first-name basis. The Volare quickly became famous, not for speed, style, or comfort, but for recalls. Lots of recalls. We're talking rust issues before the paint had time to settle, suspension problems that made it wander like a lost puppy, and trim pieces that seemed to fall off if you slammed the door too hard. For some unlucky drivers, the new small car was more like the new tow truck client. Performance-wise, it was about as exciting as watching paint dry, if the paint occasionally flaked off unexpectedly. The handling? Let's just say floaty is a polite term. You didn't so much steer it as suggest a direction and hope the front wheels agreed. Still, in its own way, the Volare became a lovable lemon. It was cheap, easy to find, and had that unmistakable mid-70s charm. A time capsule on 4 wheels. And hey, if you could keep it running, you had yourself a conversation starter at every gas station. Number 4. By 1974, Dodge was still trying to squeeze some life out of the Dart lineup, and the Dart Sport was supposed to be the youthful, sporty option. Problem was, the youth of '74 had just been hit with sky-high gas prices and a whole lot of emissions rules. So the sport part of Dart Sport was mostly just marketing smoke. Under the hood, you could get a V8, but even then it felt like it was running with one foot in a bucket. The base 6-cylinder models? Sluggish enough to make merging onto the freeway feel like an extreme sport. And the styling? Let's just say it wasn't ugly, but it had that "my parents bought it for me" vibe, instead of "check out my sweet ride" energy. The Dart Sport did have one thing going for it: price. It was cheap enough that bargain hunters and first-time buyers flocked to it, because hey, a car's a car, right? Trouble was, you got exactly what you paid for. A dated design, handling that felt more like a boat ride, and interior materials that could double as Tupperware. Still, for some folks, the Dart Sport was a loyal little beater, the kind of car you could park anywhere without worrying about door dings, and the kind you could fix with a wrench, duct tape, and sheer stubbornness. It might not have been fast, flashy, or famous, but it was pure 70s Detroit, basic, boxy, and just trying to hang on. Number 3. The AMC Gremlin hit the streets in 1970, but by '73, it had fully embraced its role as the weird kid in the high school parking lot. Imagine taking a normal compact car, lopping off the trunk with a chainsaw, and calling it innovative design. That's basically the Gremlin. AMC marketed it as a hip, budget-friendly hatchback for young drivers, but the styling was so awkward it looked like it was permanently mid-transformation into something else. Maybe a station wagon, maybe a toaster. And while it was short enough to squeeze into tight parking spots, the rear end was so stubby it made even Beetles look like limousines. Under the hood, you could get everything from a tiny 4-cylinder to a chunky 6, but none of them exactly lit your hair on fire. Handling was, well, spirited if you were being polite, and tippy if you weren't. Inside, the vinyl seats and bare-bones dash reminded you that this was a car designed with cost-cutting in mind. AMC basically said, you wanted cheap, you got cheap. Still, the Gremlin had charm. It was funky, unapologetic, and it stood out in a sea of boring sedans. Sure, it might have been the butt of 1,000 jokes, but it was your butt in that driver's seat, and it got you from A to B with a little bit of personality, even if that personality was the automotive equivalent of a dad joke. Number 2. When Chevy rolled out the Vega in the early 70s, it was supposed to be their golden ticket into the booming small car market. On paper, it sounded like a home run. Sleek styling, lightweight design, and a new aluminum engine that promised modern performance. But in reality, this thing aged faster than milk left out in the sun. The Vega had 2 big problems: rust and engines that self-destructed. Thanks to minimal rust proofing, the fenders started bubbling faster than a pot of mac and cheese. And if you lived anywhere that salted the roads in winter, you could practically watch the metal disappear week by week. As for that fancy new aluminum engine, let's just say it loved to overheat, warp its head, and guzzle oil like a frat boy hitting a keg. Chevy sold the Vega as a hip, affordable ride for the younger crowd, but by the time many owners hit 40,000 miles, the car looked like it had been through 3 presidential administrations. Reliability was so sketchy that Vega became shorthand for money pit in some circles. Still, it's not all bad news. The Vega has a certain underdog charm. It was stylish for its day, fun to toss around when it ran right, and it tried to push the envelope. Unfortunately, it mostly just pushed its owners toward the bus stop. Number 1. When Ford rolled out the Pinto in '71, the pitch was simple: a cheap, cheerful, easy-to-park runabout for the everyman. It was the kind of car you could pick up new for about $2,000, toss your friends in, and head to the drive-in without a care in the world. Unfortunately, without a care was exactly the problem, because Ford apparently didn't care much about where they put the gas tank. See, the Pinto's gas tank was mounted right behind the rear axle, and in a low-speed rear-end crash, the whole setup could turn your subcompact into a rolling Zippo lighter. The phrase explosive personality took on a very literal meaning. While most cars just got crumpled bumpers, the Pinto had a bad habit of catching fire, a detail that didn't exactly make it the poster child for safe, family-friendly motoring. Ford's infamous cost-benefit analysis didn't help either. In what became one of the most talked-about corporate blunders in auto history, they calculated it was cheaper to settle lawsuits than to fix the design. Let's just say that decision aged about as well as unrefrigerated shrimp. Despite the bad press, the Pinto actually sold pretty well. Over 3 million of them rolled off the line. And if you had one that didn't end up in flames, it was a zippy little grocery getter with a certain cheap and cheerful charm. But for many, the Pinto will always be remembered less for its low price tag and more for its high flammability rating.